Gumball has caused more trouble than you might expect with other places around the world. From small edits to full-on bans, we're going over them all, and the reasons for each one. Starting with the first episode of Gumball, the DVD. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin are in full-on panic mode because they forgot to return a movie. They're running around trying to fix everything before their mom finds out. And in the original version, Gumball says,
"We need to get the laser video before Mom kicks our butt!"
That sounds like a normal cartoon joke, right? Well, apparently not in Poland. The broadcasters there decided to remove it completely because they didn't want kids to think that moms are violent or that hitting their children is okay. So to be safe, they just erased the line. So Polish kids watched the same scene, but without the kicking our butt part. Everything else stayed the same, but the joke was gone.
Ah! What are we gonna do? Face the consequences of our actions and tell Mom? No. Just give me a little time to think.
Which is honestly kind of funny because Nicole doesn't even need to kick anyone. If you've watched the show, you know her angry face alone is already more threatening than a kick. Next, we're moving up to the episode where even a single word caused some edits. In the episode The Storm, Gumball accidentally calls his classmate Carmen, who is a cactus, stupid.
I'm so sick of your stupid pet names and your gross loved up faces. You don't see me and Penny acting like that.
That's because you're not going out with her.
Exactly.
In most countries, it's just a small joke that kids probably won't even think twice about. But in some places, broadcasters decided that that word was too harsh. So for the version that aired in those countries, Gumball's line was changed to coward. Just one tiny word, but it was enough to make the episode safer for TV. It's kind of funny to think about, because the rest of the episode stayed exactly the same. Even small edits like this show how different countries have different rules for what kids can hear. One word can completely change how the scene is perceived, and apparently calling a cactus stupid was considered a little too much. Next, we have the episode Christmas, where Gumball ends up explaining some big truths about magical beings. In the episode, the Watersons are celebrating Christmas, and Nicole drops a few truth bombs on the kids. She tells them that Santa Claus isn't real.
Let me tell you something about Santa Claus. There is no Santa Claus.
And later adds the Tooth Fairy and even Bigfoot don't exist either. Now for most of us, that would completely brush over. But in some countries, broadcasters decided that it was too much. In the Netherlands, the UK, Ireland, and Switzerland, those lines were completely cut. Kids in those places still saw the usual Gumball chaos, but they didn't get the part where Nicole crushes a few childhood beliefs. It's a little wild if you think about it. The rest of the episode is full of wacky antics, but a few sentences about magical made-up people were apparently a big deal. Next up, we have the episode The Society, in which Gumball tries to impress Principal Brown with a super weird handshake. He's doing all these hand movements, scratching, tapping fingers, and making faces in classic Gumball fashion.
No!
I think I need to wash my hand.
Allow me to help.
But here's the thing. In some countries, a few of these hand gestures actually had slightly obscene meanings. What's hilarious to us was apparently a no-go for kids in the UK and Ireland once again. So for those versions, the scene was cut or edited to avoid accidental dirty jokes. You'd never think a handshake could be controversial, but here we are. Next up is the episode The Apprentice, where Gumball takes signing a document to, let's just say, a very unusual level. In the episode, Gumball is trying to prove to Mr. Fitzgerald that he's the right guy to date Penny. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, leave it to Gumball to turn that into chaos. There's this one scene where he needs to sign a document, but instead of using his hands, he decides it's a brilliant idea to sign it with his butt. In some countries, that part was completely cut. They didn't want kids watching a cartoon doing, well, that. Everything else in the episode stayed the same, but that one silly moment got erased. Next, we have the episode The Signal, in which Darwin's workouts get way out of hand. In the episode, Darwin suddenly decides that it's time to get serious about fitness. He wants to work out, get stronger, and improve himself, which honestly sounds pretty healthy at first. But the problem is, Gumball is the one helping him, and that never ends well. During one workout scene, Darwin tries lifting way too much weight for someone his size. He strains so hard that his face starts stretching and bulging in a really uncomfortable way. almost like it's about to explode. It's exaggerated cartoon animation, but also a bit disturbing to watch, especially for younger kids. Because of that, this scene was edited or removed in some versions. The concern was that kids might try to copy what Darwin was doing and try lifting heavy weights without understanding how dangerous that actually is. On top of that, the animation itself was considered a little too intense and scary for a kid's show. The rest of the episode stays the same, but this moment was toned down to avoid sending the wrong message, which makes sense because Darwin trying to become a bodybuilder overnight was never gonna end safely anyways. But now, let's move on to the episode The Nuisance. In this episode, the Wattersons want to be accepted as a perfect family, so they start changing their behavior to look more polite, more proper, and more normal. At first, everything seems harmless, but then things take a very strange turn. As they try harder to act perfect, the family slowly transforms into more realistic looking versions of themselves. The animation becomes unsettling, with stiff movements, blank expressions, and designs that feel way too close to real life. It stops feeling like a cartoon and starts feeling creepy. In some countries, parts of these transformation scenes were cut out, especially the moment when Darwin turns into a dog, and the second time Nicole and Anais change. These scenes were considered too disturbing and intense for a kid's show. The episode still aired, but without these moments. Next is The Burden. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin are put in charge of taking care of the school hamster, and somehow this leads to one of the show's most awkward scenes. Out of nowhere, Miss Simeon shows up in Principal Brown's office, acting extremely flirty. She's wearing lipstick, talking about romance, and making strange noises while the kids are standing right there.
Romance now! Whoa!
The scene heavily suggests that something very inappropriate is about to happen, even though nothing is shown directly. In several countries, this scene was removed completely. But now, let's go to the episode The Spoiler. In this episode, Gumball becomes completely obsessed with avoiding spoilers for a movie he's excited to watch. He takes it so seriously that he starts silencing anyone who might even accidentally ruin it for him. That's when Anton comes in, and when he tries to speak, Gumball turns him into a sandwich and takes a bite out of him just to stop him from talking. It's played as a joke, but when you think about it, Gumball is basically eating one of his classmates. In some countries, this scene was cut. It was considered too violent and even disturbing. The idea of a character being eaten, even if he's bred, crossed the line for a kid's show. Next, in The Dress, Darwin starts drawing pictures on his notebook, and without realizing it, he draws Gumball wearing a dress. Later on, he takes a photo of Gumball dressed that way. In some African countries, these scenes were removed. The exact reason was never clearly explained, but both the drawing and the photo scene were cut from the episode. Everything else stayed the same. Some people believe it was done to avoid confusion or controversy, while others think it was simply seen as inappropriate for local audiences. Whatever the reason, the episode still aired, just with those moments missing. Moving on, we have the episode The Man, in which Gumball becomes obsessed with the idea of being a real man, and starts listing all the ridiculous rules he thinks defines masculinity. Things like eating meat with your fingers, never washing your pants, scratching yourself in public, and drinking milk straight from the carton. It's one of those classic Gumball moments where the show makes fun of every stereotype by pushing them to the extreme, but not everyone was laughing. In many countries across Asia, Taiwan, Russia, and large parts of Eastern Europe, a huge chunk of this scene was quietly removed. The long speech about how a man should behave was cut down so much that only one line survived.
A man eats meat with his fingers!
Everything else was gone, which completely changed the joke and made Gumball sound way less unhinged than he actually was supposed to be. At the same time, another scene was also edited. Granny JoJo and Louie's first kiss was shortened or removed in countries such as Turkey and several Eastern European countries, because obviously that part needed to be removed to save the children. Not the unhinged masculinity rant, but the grandma romance. So depending where you watched it, this episode either roasted masculinity or barely did anything at all. Next up, we have the episode The Flower, in which Gumball becomes obsessed with impressing Penny, and that obsession quickly turns into full-on aggression. There's a scene where he attacks Leslie, calls him a loser, and even tries to kick him.
Gumball, what is wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? Hanging out with this loser? instead of me.
Come on, Leslie. Let's get out of here.
It's exaggerated cartoon behavior, but it's also pretty intense compared to what the show usually does. In some countries, such as Hungary, Romania, and the Czech Republic, parts of the scene were cut. The concern was that kids might copy Gumball's behavior and think that being violent or aggressive towards others is acceptable, especially when jealousy is involved. The episode still aired, but those aggressive moments were toned down. Without them, Gumball came off as less unhinged, which honestly changes the whole vibe of the episode. It's one of those cases where removing just a few seconds can completely soften a character's actions. Moving on to the next episode, The Responsible. Gumball and Darwin are left in charge of Anais while their parents are away, and things go wrong almost immediately. But the wildest moment happens when they decide that cartoons might be harmful because of commercials. To protect Anais, both the boys grab baseball bats and completely destroy the TV. It's loud, chaotic, and played for laughs, but it also shows kids smashing expensive electronics without consequences. In Taiwan, this scene was removed because it could encourage children to copy the behavior and damage their own TVs at home. The episode still aired, just without the destruction, which is kind of ironic because the whole point of the episode is about responsibility, and smashing a TV with a bat is probably the worst lesson possible. Next up, we have the banana. In this episode, Darwin is having a really rough day and completely loses control of his emotions. What starts as a misunderstanding quickly turns into chaos when Darwin attacks Banana Joe, splashes water in the teacher's face, and even tries to fight his classmate. This level of aggression from Darwin stood out because he's usually the calm and kind one in the group. Seeing him act this violently was a bit much for some audiences. Because of that, parts of this scene were cut in countries like Hungary, Romania, and the Czech Republic once again. The episode still aired, but Darwin's outburst was toned down to avoid showing excessive misbehavior and violence. Without those scenes, Darwin comes across as upset rather than out of control, which makes the episode feel lighter overall. Next, in the episode The Downer, Gumball goes crazy and gets a little extreme. In one scene, he throws little Jimmy into the toilet and flushes it. In Asia and Taiwan, that part was cut because showing a kid being flushed down the toilet was considered too violent for young viewers. However, in Latin America, Asia, Taiwan, and Turkey, a flashback showed Gumball handling Richard's pectorals in a funny but suggestive way. That part was removed entirely to avoid any awkward interpretations of physical contact. In the next episode, The Triangle, Darwin gets extremely nervous about performing in front of a crowd. To help calm him down, Leslie gives him the classic advice of imagining people without clothes. It's meant to be harmless motivation, but Darwin takes it way too literally. The awkward moment happens when Darwin's imagination runs wild, and there's a scene where Steve bends down to pick something up, while Darwin is standing right behind him. Nothing explicit is shown, but the implication is very obvious, and that alone made some people uncomfortable. Because of this, the scene was cut in parts of Latin America, as it was considered too awkward and inappropriate for a children's cartoon, even though the joke relies more on suggestion than visuals. In the next episode, The Pest, Gumball and Anais go to Miss Simeon for help, because Anais is being bullied. Miss Simeon decides that the best way to comfort her is to show her her own scars and explain how she survived through tough situations. In the original version, Miss Simeon mentions that one of her scars is in a very private area, and she even starts to point it out. While it's played as a dark joke, the implication alone was enough to cross the line for some regions. Because of this, the scene was removed in several Latin American countries. The rest of the episode stayed the same, but the moment involving the scar's location was cut to keep things appropriate for kids. It's one of those scenes where the joke didn't really need to go that far, and removing it didn't really change the story at all. Next up, we have the episode The Test. In this episode, Gumball tries to stop himself from saying rude or mean things. He forces all his bad thoughts inside, thinking that being nice all the time is the right thing to do. Of course, that turns out to be a terrible idea. By the end of the episode, Gumball can't hold it it anymore and ends up vomiting all over Tobias. The scene is extremely graphic for a cartoon. The vomit melts Tobias's face, leaving a huge hole in the middle of it, and it looks more like a horror movie than a kid's show. Because of how disturbing that scene was, it was being censored in some countries. The moment was considered too intense and even gave the impression that Tobias had been seriously harmed. The episode still aired, but without that ending. And honestly, even without the melting face, the message about bottling up emotion still comes across just fine. But let's move on to the next episode, The Menu. In this episode, Richard becomes obsessed with winning a secret hamburger prize. His hunger drives him to extreme behavior, including eating way too much and completely losing control. One of the most disturbing moments happens when Richard starts sweating melted cheese and it drips off like liquid, and the whole scene is intentionally gross. In the UK, this specific scene was removed. It was considered too disgusting to show, especially for younger viewers. Interestingly, other shocking moments in the same episode, like Richard eating the mascot's fingers, were left untouched. Next, we have The Picnic, in which Gumball and Darwin wander into a place called the Forest of Doom. It looks creepy, but they don't really take it seriously at first. That changes though when they meet two squirrels who look cute, but are actually terrifying. The squirrels start threatening the boys in their own language, basically saying that they're gonna tear them apart. Nothing graphic happens, but the tone is dark and unsettling, especially for a kid's show. Because of how disturbing that threat was, this scene was cut in some regions. Even without showing violence, the idea of it was considered too intense for young audiences. But as usual, the episode still aired, but the moment was removed to keep it lighter. Next up is the car. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin accidentally destroy Mr. Robinson's car. And by accidentally, I mean they absolutely ruined it. When Mr. and Mrs. Robinson find out, they don't just get angry. They completely snap and start attacking a police officer. Yes, a police officer in a children's cartoon. But the scene that caused problems is when the police pull out a stun gun and zap both Mr. and Mrs. Robinson while they're laying on the ground. Some countries decided that watching cartoon parents get electrocuted by law enforcement might not be the best lesson for kids. So again, in a lot of countries, this scene was cut. Those were all the episodes that were edited. But now let's talk about some episodes that weren't aired at all in certain countries. Like the episode The Mirror, which is basically Gumball's version of a horror movie. In the episode, Gumball gets one of those creepy chain messages that says if he doesn't forward it, something terrible will happen. Like a normal person, he ignores it, and then his life immediately starts falling apart. Everything goes wrong. He loses money, his friends turn on him, and eventually this terrifying creature called the Snatcher shows up to collect what he owes. The episode is meant to make fun of chainmails, but it goes way harder than it needs to, and honestly feels more like a horror story than a cartoon, and some countries were not ready for that energy. In the MENA region and Turkey, the entire episode was completely banned. They didn't even try to edit it. They just decided not to air it at all. Meanwhile, in Asia and Taiwan, they tried to make it safer by cutting specific moments. The scene with Richard, Nicole, and Anais eating chicken and suddenly being snatched was removed. And also, the third jump scare where the Snatcher scares Gumball was cut. Next, we have the episode The Slap, in which Gumball discovers that Tobias greets people by patting them on the butt. What starts as a tiny, awkward habit quickly turns into a full-blown musical number, with Gumball singing an entire song about butt slapping. The episode leans hard into physical jokes that are really uncomfortable humor, which not everyone appreciated. In Russia and several Eastern European countries, the episode was banned completely. Instead of editing the episode, they just decided, nope, kids don't need to see this, and it never aired at all. Well, the problem was the focus on touching and personal boundaries. Even though the whole thing was meant to be ridiculous and over the top, some regions clearly thought this was too much. And honestly, this is one of those episodes that even longtime fans admit is a lot. Well, those are all the Gumball episodes that were changed around the world. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and click the video on screen right here. I'm sure you'll love it.